We're here at the Center for Livable Future. I'm Marc Steiner for the Center for Livable Future and for the Marc Steiner Show and the Center for Emerging Media working together here. We're about to talk with Winona LaDuke, who's visiting us here in Baltimore. She is one of the sages and leaders of the movement for social change, for indigenous rights, for making us all eat better, for thinking about who we are as a people. Written many books, and without going into all that, Winona, it's lovely to meet you. Good to have
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Miigwech.
So one of the things that I thought about is I was thinking about your coming here today was wild rice, because it's in a lot of the interviews you've done, articles I've seen you write, the world you grew up in, how your parents met. It's all built around wild rice.
That is true. Yeah. So Monomen, that's what we call it. It means kind of Monomen. It means like wondrous or spirit food, spirit grain. And it's the only grain indigenous to North America. The wheat, all those guys come from someplace else. This is it. It's a grass, and it grows on lakes and rivers, and it was a lot more dominant in the northern ecosystems, but with the advent of bad agricultural planning and draining of such things and water diversion projects, we lost a lot of it. But yes, it's very significant in our community. Our people, the Anishinaabe started out here on the East Coast. We were instructed by our prophets to follow a shell which appeared in the sky to the place where the food grows on the water. And so that is the significance. It's part of our migration story and our most spiritual food, arguably. And
the central story to everything.
It is. Wild rice is the first food a baby has, and it is also the last food usually. And it is served at our feasts and our ceremonies. And you're right. I am actually here because of wild rice.
Right.
My father is from the White Earth Reservation in northern Minnesota, as you may gather, since that's where I live. And he, interesting man, he passed away a number of years ago, but
White Bear, right?
Sun Bear. Yeah, Vincent LaDuke.
Right.
And he left the reservation kind of, I'm not going to say to seek his fortune, but to go off, and he hitchhiked across the country. I was looking at some old pictures of the guy. He had like a full-on headdress and a sign that said, "Have blanket, will travel."
I did not.
He hitchhiked across the country to New York City with wild rice, and he became a fine purveyor of wild rice, at which point he met my mother, who is a first-generation Russian Jew and is an artist. And she's still an amazing artist. Her name's Betty LaDuke, and she had just come back from mural painting in Mexico for about 3 years, and was living in New York again and painting. And he met my mother, and they hit it off quite well. As you can see, I'm here.
Here you are.
But he was selling wild rice. And she's like, "What is this?" And then they ran off, and he became an extra in the Westerns. And I was born in East LA, raised in a small town in Southern Oregon, and then moved home after.
Ashland, right?
In Ashland, that is right. And then I moved home to my reservation after I graduated from college in 1981.
Not just any college, but Harvard.
Right. When I graduated from Harvard in 1981, I returned and have lived there since. That's about, we'll go 30 years.
One of the things that...
rice. Working on rice.
Wild rice. And so, but one of the things that also hit me about wild rice and your life and the res that you live on is that it's also the story of biodiversity, industrialization, the destruction of wild rice, and you and other people's battle to reclaim it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say I took it for granted that there will always be wild rice. And then I got this knock on the head one day from the University of Minnesota, which was trying to genetically, it cracked the DNA sequence of wild rice, and they wanted the right to genetically engineer it. And, I have some knowledge of these issues, and I was like, well, that makes no sense. The word wild rice should not be associated with the words genetic engineering, and it's no longer wild, and so I got this wake-up call. Around 2001, some of my elders, they knock on my door, they said, "Winona, we gotta go take a look at this," and they know I'm a good talker, and I could go down there, and I'm not afraid, pretty much, and plus I got bigger cousins that are scarier than me, way scarier, so I was like, well, let's go. And so began, about a 7-year battle with the U on their right to genetically engineer wild rice. And, which they talk a lot about academic freedom, as do most universities, but there should be an equal amount of academic responsibility. And, that is not right. You cannot genetically engineer something because you will release it into the wild. And you get 60,000 acres of lakes and rivers full of rice, and it would get contaminated. So I went back and forth with their studies, and they, I call it little ladying you. You go sit there in a meeting, and they would say, they would act as if they spoke louder or said it more simply, that I would change my opinion. Or that somehow I would evolve and that genetically engineered foods would become acceptable to me. And that whole idea is not only arrogant, it's kind of baffling that someone would not have the common sense to realize that they may not actually be right. You may not actually agree with them. And so we went back and forth, and they talked about their studies on wind drift and pollination. And I said, at one point I said to Musk Plant at the university as a dean, the agriculture school, I said, what about the ducks? Where's your study on ducks? That's who moves rice, is ducks. You're going to control all the ducks and the geese. What's your plan on that? And they looked at me like some poor lost soul. And but in the end, we do not have any genetically engineered wild rice. We have the youth still thinking about things, but I think, we'll see how it goes. I'm pretty confident that it will not work out.
One of the things you said once in one place you spoke that you wrote about was that...
How do you know all this about me? No.
I read a lot.
Okay, all right. What did I say?
I've read your books as well.
Oh, really? Okay, so tell me what I said someplace.
You said it had to do with the what happened in Ireland and with the monoculture destroying the people and the potato that actually came from you in the first place, from native people in Ireland. But that, what did they eat before that? I can't quite figure out, but they had these potatoes. We gave them the potatoes, or the indigenous people.
Gave them the
potatoes. Yeah. But you talk about the wide variety of wild rice, and how that you have to really be. There's this guy, what's his name that you wrote about? Spud Finley.
Spud Finley.
That's Finley, who goes out.
He's still in this world, yes,
right?
yes.
And so, but it's that this huge diversity of wild rice that is all part of what seems to be the work you've been doing in trying to bring the Rez and other people back to the foods that were eaten historically. Mm-hmm. That battle you're making.
Yeah, I mean, our community is actually, in the spectrum of where things are at, we're not in that bad of shape. We have a very strong subsistence economy. There's a push, that is to say, we, right now we're planning for our gardens. And subsistence may not be, I don't like the term subsistence. We have a land-based economy that is healthy, that is indigenous. In that, right now we're planning for our gardens. People are going out to start picking medicinal plants here, mushrooms. The berries come in. Our moon in June is called O'Day Menegisis, strawberry moon. Then Mean Gises, as our blueberry moon, comes
Gises
after.
Means moon?
Yeah. And that mean word, or min, is the seed, which is the same thing as monomen, or wild rice. It's the same, and mandamin is corn. That min is at the end, just for your little Ojibwe lesson. But it's in there. And then, we have, I suppose about middle of May, first 2 weeks of June, we got fiddlehead ferns. Mm-hmm. High-end things you get, if you go Whole Foods, I don't know, you know what I'm saying? It's we have that, and so we have this wealth of an economy, plus right now they're spearing fish, and so we still have a lot of those foods. But what happens is colonization process, where people are, where the laws make it illegal to harvest. Private property signs go up. People start putting pesticides out, pesticide drift. These kind of things have an effect on us. Then, there's this lack of recognition for who we are and our way of life. It's obviously been a point of contention for many years that we shouldn't be able to do this. And even with wild rice, the idea that we should have such a great harvest really upset the University of Minnesota. They had to go domesticate things. So, having said that, we have that. But what happens is that this process, and then now increasingly the push in of the cash economy, where people become increasingly addicted to the need for cash, those issues affect us. So a lot of the work we're trying to do is to figure out how to diminish the need for cash, whether it's through fuel poverty, addressing those issues, or externalizing your food economy, so that people can restore this local food way of life and be healthy. That's kind of our integrated approach. I don't know if you're following me on this, but
yeah, absolutely.
That's the piece we're after, and we got a good place to start from. We aren't scratching. You know, we're wealthy. We are wealthy. You know, I could be busy all the time with this. You know, and I am pretty busy with it. I like it though. You know, it's good. And my grandkids, I have grandkids now, and they putz around with me and.
Another good Ojibwe word.
Putz, that's right, putz. I schlep my schmatas too. Do you like that? I thought you'd like that, yeah.
So, it's going to be...
My Yiddish is not as good as my Anishinaabe, though.
Ojibwe. I like it. It's a very good mix.
Yeah.
So but it's also that there's this wealth of thousands of years of seeds and plants and food that you and others are reclaiming around the country, that you're saying we're going to find a way that what we grew before, and it's going to happen again.
And it has broader implications. I mean, you mentioned the Irish potato famine, the creation of a monoculture, agricultural monoculture. I mean, it's widespread in this country, and you've got an unsustainable food system. Of a bunch of monocrops that they now want to genetically engineer because they've got one, pest after another because everything's becoming resistant and their topsoil is diminishing, and it's all. Everything's ending up at the bottom of the Mississippi in the Delta, right? So that is really not a long-term plan. Right. And that's 50 years of really bad ideas. The question and the answer is not, the scientific paradigm would say that the answer is to continue down that trajectory. What we would say is that there's this other path, which is this green path, which is you discard the bad ideas. You keep a few good things in there, like I like the solar panels, and you got some of them Amish tools. A few other fabulous things. You keep those things, and you probably have to keep a few other things. And then you go back and you restore biodiversity and agrobiodiversity, because that's your answer. If you want to talk about resilience from pesticides, or resilience from pests, if they're called pests or insects, whatever they're called, sometimes they just need a share of the food too.
Exactly.
You got to just own up that you don't get everything, right? But if you have the diversity, then you have a better shot at it. And, that's the wisdom, and that also keeps your soil, that rotation, all of that. So, what we're looking at doing, we're looking at restoring these really old varieties of corn. I have this really cool squash I'm going to talk about later today, 800-year-old seeds.
Oh, I read about this.
Right. And I ate some 2 days ago. I served it for the Passover dinner at our house.
Great.
Did you like that? Yeah,
I like that.
We're holiday opportunists in our family. That's what my kids say. That's what we do. Passover, Easter. The 4th of July I'm not big on. Just have to admit that one. But I like blowing up stuff.
Right.
My kids do. But anyway, 800-year-old squash, very good. And those guys are climate change resilient. They were adapted for microclimates for the soil. They're tough guys. But, you have to be mindful with them. You don't just throw your seeds out. You talk to them, and it's a little bit of mindful practice. But that's this whole restoration of who we are and how we become better people. Because if you have to be related to your food or related to the earth. And that process of gardening and harvesting and growing and is part of how we do that and become better humans.
And part of what I heard you say before is, when you kind of reflect on what you just said, is that you have this philosophy of how we have to decolonize ourselves.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of, the Native community, when I started, I was raised well. People always say, we were raised on a lot of traditional foods, but then also we everything from scratch. And that comes from both sides of my family. Nobody, it was like nobody was on the buying boxed foods program, And so, I mean, that's my frame of reference. I don't have a frame of reference besides that. But that process of colonization, in the Native community was one where you ended up with commodity foods from the USDA. And then you ended up, if you wanted to be like white people, you ate their food. Really. And so people would say, it makes me feel poor when I eat deer meat. I heard a young woman say that to me. I don't like feeling poor. I feel poor when I eat deer meat.
Fry bread, which is...
Right, that's a perfect example.
Right.
But that's an American thing too, is that, Americans now eat out and they eat at McDonald's, and the idea we're too busy to garden. I can't garden. I can't cook. That's all a bunch of marketing that happened after World War II. to get women, to build an agricultural system that, an industrial food system. And so we became dependent, all of us. And now we are entirely dependent, almost entirely dependent. And it is looked at like you're like a back to the land, or there's this whole like marginalization that occurs of people who garden or people who grow their own food or harvest it, instead of, figuring out that what we really need to do is to restore that. And not everybody should be tromping around the woods, though. Some people should just not. It's like, don't get me torque and bolts on a wind turbine. That's not me. But, then supporting those local economies, huh? Yeah, give me a hoe. That's what my kids say. That's what I tell those young kids in the schools, those teenagers. I say, we're going hoeing now. Let's go hoeing. And they all look at me. I said, no, a hoe is a farming implement. Right. But it's always fodder for good conversation, that.
You ran twice as vice president.
Twice for vice president.
On the green ticket with Ralph Nader.
That is right.
He's a good old friend of mine.
Yeah, a great soul.
He's a good soul.
Yes.
Very interesting guy, very honest human being. And then you decided, I was thinking about this last night, then you decided to endorse Kerry and then endorse President Barack Obama, who became President Barack Obama. And who knows what you do in 2012. But I was thinking about this, and the books you've written, the Covering the Sacred and other things you've written, it feels like somehow some people's politics, their ideology defines who they are, but it feels like your life and work and spirituality define your politics rather than the other way around. Yeah,
which seems to make sense to me. I don't, I never really quite could fit into any box, and I'm probably not going there anytime soon. I'm not sure it's healthy to be in a box. I think that's part of our problem is that we feel comfy and cozy in whatever it is of social group or, economic class or, and perception of who we are. And I think that's, probably not, so for, what, change is made in a lot of ways. You make change by growing different food. You make change by, peddling consciousness. You make change by battling, corporations and, down. One of my girlfriends battled them into bankruptcy. We've done that a few times, or, putting up wind turbines or, whatever.
All the things you've done on your res.
That's what we do. And then also, I think one of the most precious, things to do, and I feel privileged to be a part of this, is I want to say to give people hope. To say, look, if those guys could do it, look, they don't really got a lot going on. They got all kinds of messed up statistics in their community, but look what they did. Because we don't have, according to a lot of people, we don't have anything going for us. But my community, we got a lot of smart people. We got a lot of wild rice. We got a lot of wind, and we actually know who we are, which is more than a lot. And that is something to, and then we actually do it. We don't just talk about it. We do it. And when these young people come to me, and they say, hey, how'd you do that? Or can I work on one of them solar things, Ms. LaDuke? I'm like, yeah, come on over. Let's figure it out. This summer we're going to do one. We did some regular solar panels, but, we really don't have any money. So I'm going back to this idea of, I think it was 57 aluminum cans for a solar thermal panel for the back of a house. It's 57 or 87. We did this before. You line them up and then you just make this thermal thing it's reusing materials. I'm going to try a couple of those this year.
You haven't done it yet.
I did it before and it worked fine. And I think it's still operational. It is still operational. I've done these, more expensive ones, $1,000. Well, that one's about 300 or 200. So I'm going to try a few of those this summer and see how that goes, because you can involve kids in that. And
there's a guy I interviewed not long ago, Henry Red Cloud.
Yeah. Good friend of mine.
Yeah, he was doing all this stuff.
Yeah. And he has the model and he has it there. And if I could capitalize us, we would do the similar thing. But this year, I think I'm going to just do some trainings with this other and see what I got.
I know we got on to move to the next thing, but one final thing I was thinking about was that here you have the United States of America and all the industrialization that's taken place. People moved off their land into reservations, more than half, I guess, of indigenous people now live in cities, but people onto these reses and that are kind of like rural ghettos in a lot of ways that were created that way. But something is afoot that there seems to me there's a kind of a new power growing out of the res world in different parts of our country, whether it's people in Wind River or in Rosebud or in Minnesota where you live and other places. That's coming. It's I'm trying how to put this right. There's like this amalgam marriage, this meeting of these worlds that's creating something brand new out of something very old that in some ways has something new to teach if people will open their ears. I'm not talking about all this kind of woo-woo spiritual stuff. I'm talking about something much more fundamental.
Yeah, I mean, I of course I do. I mean, and I think that a lot of people despair at globalization, you know, and you know, I do my share of that too. But you know what is like a globalized economy is predicated on access to cheap oil. Turns out that's not the future.
Right.
You know, and so Walmart can ship those shrimp in from China or Vietnam for the next little bit, but that's not going to be happening in 10 years. So somebody better be figuring out how to eat here and where that protein is going to come from. And so, you know, there's these grandiose ideas of empire, and they're there. You know, they still got it. They got their plan on it. But I'm thinking that's not going to work out, and I don't even care. I'm going to work on this one because that's not, you know. And so I think that in our community and in others, this other way, this Deb way, Mikana, this real path, you know, is in doing that, you know, we remember who we are, and we're better people for it. And we realize that, you know, we learn some things, and we take those skills, like, you know, those Danes from Lowland, that island of Lowland, they got some darn good wind turbines. You know, we wouldn't have got that one. You know, and my great-great-great-grandfather over in Poland had a wind turbine, or he had a wind-powered grist mill, you know. And so I think about that sometimes. I told my mom, I said, I think I'm trying to work his stuff out back over here. You know what I'm saying is that we didn't have that.
Yeah.
That's a good technology, and how you adapt it in this millennium to make some place where, you know, my friend Mike Wiggins, he's tribal chair of this reservation, he says, seems like people don't want to live another 1,000 years. You know? And I said, someone better be thinking about how we're going to live the next round. You know, and that's what I think we're doing.
Well, thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you.